In the last Retro Rant, I talked about games that are fads and that indie developers getting huge egos would be next. So today, I'm going to talk about the movie Sense and Sensibility. Wow, a review of a movie from 1995? No. I'm going to talk about indie developers' egos being out of whack. If there's one thing that's a pet peeve of mine is people whose egos are so big they're eating themselves. And indie developers seem to be at the top when it comes to the gaming industry. Oh, I made a really popular game. Or my game was featured, blah 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 blah, shut up. Long time ago, I was friends with a guy and we made a game called Neosonic Godspeed, a Sonic fan game. I came in around the halfway point, but I helped with level concepts and designs. I essentially sat next to the guy and said, hey, what if this or that, and did minor voice work. Well, the game was actually featured in a magazine once. I think it was either PC Gamer Europe or Eurogamer. It was some gaming magazine in Europe. That's all that I remember. Because this was a long time ago, and they even sent us copies of the magazine, of which I lost my copy. The game was also on Ytanium's top 5 games for a while. This boosted my friend's ego to an insane degree. I was excited, but I wasn't on top of the world. It was a Sonic fan game. And then we moved on to a King of Fighters fan game called Maximum Kyo. And after that, started working on concepts for an original game. I was there for some of the early concepts that got trashed, and saw the early concepts of characters for what would become the game that he would make as we had a falling out before the game idea left the conceptual stages. Even after all these years, his ego did not falter, as when his game got onto sites like Desura and eventually Steam, it was met with harsh criticism, of which he would dismiss, and people reported that he would delete negative comments and ban people from his game's forums for complaining about the lackluster quality of the game. And there was also one time where he sold 2 Full Metal Alchemist drawings to a guy that made t-shirts. The shirt seller bought them for $50 total, but he would inflate the cost each time he told the story to someone else. He was a very big connoisseur of his own farts, figuratively and literally. They were accomplishments that are cool and could be a step in the right direction, but are arguably a drop in the bucket when compared to most things. They were always blown way out of proportion. He was stuffing 15 pounds of crap into a 5-pound crap sack. I tell you this story because I experienced indie developers with massive egos firsthand. When talking about indie developers with huge egos, you cannot bring up Phil Fish, who claimed that Let's Players owe him money for playing Fez on the internet. Unfortunately, Phil, Let's Plays and live streaming are a gray area when it comes to copyright, unlike a review which falls under fair use. Why he doesn't set a precedent is beyond me. After all, he said he took the money for Fez 2 and ran away with it. Sue a well-known Let's Player that's played Fez, and let the court decide. There's also claims that he stole Fez from a friend of his, which is currently hearsay and conjecture. I haven't seen any hard evidence other than someone's word against another's. Then there's Zoe Quinn, who I don't think I can defend anymore, because she went after an indie developer who supported Gamergate when Microsoft showed off their game, becoming everything she's been a target of. I guess it's true that those who fight monsters often become monsters themselves. She made one game called Depression Quest, which was a glorified PowerPoint presentation. Her Wikipedia info says that she worked on Fez, Jazzpunk, and They Bleed Pixels. No, she didn't. She was a game tester. Saying that you worked on a game implies that you contributed some sort of work, like art, sound, or programming. A game tester doesn't mean you're a developer. You play the game, record your findings, and hand it off to the developers to fix the problems you found. You didn't program jack, you didn't draw anything, you didn't compose any music. Saying that you worked on a game is a stretch in my opinion if all you did was test it. Then there's Brianna Wu, who's now running for Congress in the state of Massachusetts. She developed one game for iOS and it even made it onto Steam, and from what I heard, it's gotten a lot of negative reception. I've seen pictures and the art style is horrendous as the characters look like those Bratz dolls after getting addicted to meth, and the animation is like 3D animation from the virtual reality scenes in The Lawnmower Man. And then there's the developers of all the trash that gets put up on Steam, where they file DMCAs against YouTubers who say their dumpster fire of a game is a dumpster fire. How big does your ego have to be that throwing store-bought assets together, not even making sure the game works, and selling it for peanuts, and they're so fragile? They're like big overinflated balloons ready to pop. I'm not going to go into too much detail, just head on over to Jim Sterling's channel and watch some of his videos where he talks about Steam and indie developers. But the thing is, these indie developers with huge egos that may have only made one game or a plethora of crap, what they've accomplished is a drop in the bucket compared to those like Yuji Naka, Richard Garriott, Hideo Kojima, Andy Gavin, Sid Meier, and of course, Shigeru Miyamoto. People who've developed numerous and critically acclaimed games. You can't be an indie developer and have a huge ego when you have people like that lording over you. Your accomplishments pale in comparison to theirs. That's why I like Scott Cawthon and Dean Dutrell as indie devs. Cawthon made a lot of garbage games, and it wasn't until Jim Sterling made fun of one of his games, Chipper & Sons Lumber Company, or whatever, as Sterling said that the look of the characters was horrifying, or something to that nature. After that, Cawthon took a good, long, depressing, hard look at his body of work and thought, if they thought this was scary, wait until they see this. And Five Nights at Freddy's was born. And despite all his success, he's still a pretty humble person from what I've seen. That's what happens when you look back at your body of work, see how far you've come, and realize, yeah, you sucked back then. Dutrell, who's worked on games like Jazz Jackrabbit and developed my favorite game of all time, Dust and the Listening Tale, hasn't let the success of his game nor the success of winning Microsoft's game contest go to his head, at least from what I've seen. And full disclosure, his studio Humble Hearts did give me the soundtrack for the game for free. But these two examples, Scott Cawthon and Dean Dutrell, they know where they came from. They know their success, and they check their egos at the door. They made great games, but they know that they have a long road ahead of them before they can stand up on stage with the developers of Legend. Which brings us to the developers of PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, the current and biggest people being babies because their egos popped like my earlier balloon analogy. Sure, they were top of the world until Fortnite came in, and they were talking about taking further action against Epic Games, who made a free-to-play Battle Royale game, of which I haven't seen anything to come of these further actions. But they're suing Chinese developers now because they quote-unquote ripped off PUBG. PUBG has nothing to rip off. You can't copyright gameplay mechanics, and even if you did, you'd lose because of something called prior work. Meaning that you can't sue others over it because you did not come up with it, and you lose the copyright. PUBG wasn't the first to come up with the Battle Royale gameplay. As I said in my last rant, DayZ and Rust were similar but just weren't as focused on Battle Royale. They focused more on survival, but players were still put up against each other in an arena to fight. But the ego to say that PUBG's iconic frying pan weapon was ripped off. Really? The frying pan that looks like any other ordinary cast iron frying pan that you could buy at the store, and the use of shipping containers as well being used in the lawsuit? PUBG's developers are grasping at straws here. Just shut up, because guess what? PUBG is an asset flip. A good asset flip with a consistent look, but an asset flip nonetheless, because they bought the stuff from the Unreal Tournament store. Your game is so generic looking that you can't claim that anything you have in it is iconic or original to the game. You could probably think that it's either Rust or DayZ from just a quick glance at it. Yes, you were king of the mountain for a while, but Fortnite just came out with a better product and booted you to second place. And the fact that you're going to sue smaller mobile developers instead of bigger fish like Epic Games says that your ego is so out of whack that you know deep down you have no legs to stand on. So do everyone a favor, check your ego at the door because it's too big to fit inside.